July 26th, 1794. 24 hours before the guillotine drops on Maximilien Robespierre. The man they call the Incorruptible sits in his room at Maurice Duplay's house on the Rue Saint-Honoré, polishing a speech that will seal his fate. Outside, Paris swelters in summer heat. Inside, Robespierre crafts words he believes will save the revolution. Instead, they become his death warrant. You think you know this story? The tyrant finally gets his due. The architect of the terror falls to his own guillotine. But the real 24 hours before Robespierre's execution reveals something different. A conspiracy months in the making. A man so paranoid he stops trusting his closest allies. In a single speech that transforms fear into action. 1794. 11 months into what historians call the Great Terror. Every day, 30 people die on the scaffold. The law of 22nd Prairial strips defendants of lawyers, witnesses, defense, guilt or innocence, life or death, nothing between. Robespierre pushed this law through the National Convention just 6 weeks earlier. Now, in July, even his allies whisper his name with dread. If you value documented revolutionary history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Ruth Sker's Fatal Purity, published by Metropolitan Books in 2006, and Peter McPhee's Robespierre, A Revolutionary Life from Yale University Press in 2013, both drawing from primary documents, including Jean Lambert Tallien's archived papers and the Committee of Public Safety's official proceedings, held at the Archives Nationales in Paris. Now back to the information. The Duplay House, number 366, Rue Saint-Honoré. Robespierre has lived here since 1791, when threats forced him underground. Maurice Duplay, a cabinet maker, rents him a small room on the second floor, 8 feet by 10 feet. A bed, a writing desk, books, portraits of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. This is where the most powerful man in France retreats each night. July 26th begins before dawn. Robespierre wakes at 5:30, always the same time, same routine. Cold water on his face, green jacket, carefully brushed, white shirt, spotless. He paces the narrow room, rehearsing phrases. Today's speech must be perfect. His political life depends on it. The speech is 2 hours long, handwritten on 43 pages. Robespierre spent weeks crafting each sentence. He accuses enemies within the convention, conspiracy in the Committee of Public Safety, plots in the Committee of General Security, but he names only 3 men: Pierre-Joseph Cambon, François-René Mallarmé, Dominique Vincent Ramel Nogaret. 3 names. 600 deputies wonder if they're next. 6:30. Robespierre breaks his fast. Bread, coffee. Eleanor Duplay, Maurice's daughter, serves him. She adores Robespierre. Some whisper they're engaged. Others say she's his spy, watching everyone who visits. Her father built the furniture in Robespierre's room. Her mother cooks his meals. Her brother prints his pamphlets. The Duplay family wraps around Robespierre like armor. 7:15. A knock at the door. Saint-Just arrives. Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, 26 years old. Robespierre's closest ally. They call him the Angel of Death. Tall, pale, never smiles. Wears his hair powdered white even in summer heat. He climbs the narrow stairs to Robespierre's room. The door closes. They talk for 90 minutes. What do they discuss? Saint-Just's own speech, planned for tomorrow's convention session. He's preparing to defend Robespierre against growing attacks. But Saint-Just doesn't show his speech to the Committee of Public Safety first. Protocol demands committee approval. Saint-Just ignores it. This breach will cost both men their lives. 9:45. Robespierre descends to the street. Paris in July. Sweat, dust, the smell of bread from Duplay's bakery next door. He walks the 8 blocks to the Tuileries Palace. Convention deputies live in fear of this daily journey. When Robespierre appears in the hall, men calculate their chances of surviving another day. The National Convention meets in the old theater of the Tuileries. 600 deputies fill curved benches rising toward the ceiling. At the front, the tribune where speakers address the assembly. Behind it, public galleries packed with sans-culottes, working men and women who cheer or jeer on command, Robespierre's supporters, or so he believes. 10:30. Robespierre enters the hall. Conversations stop. Deputies watch his face, searching for clues. Is today the day he calls for new arrests, new executions? Robespierre takes his seat in the topmost row with the Mountain faction, the most radical deputies. Men who once cheered his every word now study their papers when he speaks. But first, routine business. The convention reads reports from the armies. French forces crushed the Austrians at Fleurus 5 weeks ago. The foreign threat that justified the terror has ended. General Lazare Carnot organized the victory. He sits 20 feet from Robespierre. Knowing his success makes the terror obsolete. Makes Robespierre obsolete? 11:15. Minor debates. A petition from Marseille. Supply problems for the Northern Army. Robespierre waits. His speech burns in his jacket pocket. 43 pages that will either restore his power or destroy him. He chose to gamble everything on words. The man who sent 17,000 people to death believes he can talk his way to safety. Joseph Fouché watches from the middle benches. Recalled from Lyon, where his atheistic policies offended Robespierre. Fouché knows he's marked for execution. His name isn't in today's speech, but tomorrow might be different. Fouché has been organizing quietly for weeks, building alliances, promising moderation, plotting survival. Jean Lambert Tallien sits in the front row. His mistress, Teresa Cabarrus, languishes in La Force prison on Robespierre's orders. Tallien carries a dagger in his coat. If Robespierre calls for his arrest, Tallien plans to kill him on the spot. The convention will witness murder on the tribune. Revolutionary justice with a blade instead of words. Paul Barras calculates angles 3 rows back. Former noble turned radical, recalled from Toulon on corruption charges he knows are true. Barras has money, connections, no principles. Perfect qualifications for surviving political chaos. He's been meeting secretly with other endangered deputies, building what they'll later call the Thermidorian conspiracy. 12:15. The routine business ends. Convention President Collot d'Herbois calls for new speakers. Robespierre rises. 600 deputies tense. Some reach instinctively for hidden weapons. Others plot escape routes. Robespierre walks slowly to the tribune. Each step echoes in the sudden silence. He begins softly. Personal attacks against his character, rumors about his ambition, lies about his policies. For 30 minutes, Robespierre defends himself point by point. His voice grows stronger. The old magic returns. Some deputies nod approval. Maybe the terror can continue. Maybe Robespierre still controls France. Then the attack begins. Internal enemies. Conspiracy within the convention. Traitors in the governing committees. Robespierre's voice rises to the shriek that once terrified his opponents. But something has changed. Deputies don't cower. They lean forward, listening carefully. Not for inspiration. For names. 1:15. Robespierre names Cambon, the deputy responsible for revolutionary finances. Cambon sits motionless as Robespierre accuses him of corruption, conspiracy, counter-revolution. 600 deputies wait for more names. Robespierre pauses, sweat beating his forehead, despite the cool interior of the hall. He names Mallarmé, then Ramel Nogaret. 3 names. That's all. But the accusations continue without specifics. Enemies in the Committee of Public Safety. Traitors in the Committee of General Security. Plots within the convention itself. Robespierre speaks for 90 more minutes without naming anyone else. Every deputy wonders if he's the unnamed target. Fear transforms into anger. 2:45. Robespierre finishes. Total silence. Then a few hands clap. Scattered applause from the mountain. But most deputies sit frozen. Georges Couthon, Robespierre's ally, proposes printing the speech. Standard procedure. Usually automatic approval. The convention seems ready to follow protocol. Pierre-Joseph Cambon stands, named in the speech, marked for death, nothing left to lose. His voice shakes, but carries clearly. It is time to tell the whole truth. One man is paralyzing the National Convention. That man is the one who has just made a speech. It is Robespierre. The hall explodes. Robespierre's supporters shout Cambon down, but other voices join in. Name the names. Who are these conspirators? If you know traitors, identify them. Robespierre grips the tribune, face pale. He refuses to answer. The unnamed accusations that once terrified his enemies now mark him as a danger to everyone. 3:30. The session grows chaotic. Robespierre tries to respond, but his supporters shouts drown out critics and supporters alike. Marc-Guillaume Alexis Vadier rises to attack the speech. He's from the Committee of General Security, accused of harboring conspiracy. Vadier demands specifics, names, evidence. Robespierre offers none. Bertrand Barrère speaks next. Committee of Public Safety member, master of political survival. His voice cuts through the noise. The speech should be examined by both committees before printing. A subtle rejection. Other deputies seize the opening. Debate the speech, study it, delay it, transform it from weapon to evidence. 4:15. The vote. Print the speech immediately or refer it to committees. Robespierre's political life hangs on parliamentary procedure. The mountain splits. Some support immediate printing. Others demand committee review. The plain votes almost entirely for delay. The speech dies in committee. Robespierre has lost control, but the day isn't finished. The Jacobin Club meets tonight at 7, Robespierre's stronghold since 1789. 500 provincial clubs affiliated with Paris headquarters. If the convention fails him, the Jacobins might save him. At worst, they'll provide a final platform for his words. 5 o'clock, Robespierre leaves the Tuileries. The July sun beats down on narrow streets. Sans-Culottes, who once cheered his name, now whisper behind closed doors. Public opinion shifts like smoke. Yesterday's hero becomes tomorrow's enemy. Revolution devours its children. The walk home takes 20 minutes. Rue Saint-Honoré bustles with afternoon commerce. Shopkeepers closing early to avoid evening crowds. Working men heading to taverns where political discussions turn dangerous after dark. Robespierre passes through like a ghost. People recognize him, but don't approach. Fame has become isolation. 5:30. Back to the Duplay house. Eleanor waits with news. Visitors all day. Allies checking for signs of weakness. Enemies probing for opportunity. The house that once welcomed revolutionary pilgrims now feels like a fortress under siege. Maurice Duplay locks the front door. Too many strangers asking too many questions. Robespierre climbs to his room. 43 pages of speech scattered across his desk. The words that failed to restore his power. He stares at the manuscript, searching for errors, wrong emphasis, weak arguments, missing names, as if better phrasing could have prevented his political collapse. 6:15. A messenger arrives. The Jacobin Club wants Robespierre to repeat his convention speech tonight. Same words, different audience. Maybe the revolutionary faithful will respond where professional politicians failed. Robespierre agrees. One more throw of the dice, one final gamble. He changes clothes. His afternoon jacket is soaked with sweat. The evening demands fresh appearance. Green coat, white stockings. Hair carefully powdered. If these are his last hours of power, he'll face them looking like the incorruptible they once proclaimed him. 7 o'clock arrives. Time for the Jacobin Club. Robespierre walks the 6 blocks to Rue Saint-Honoré, number 364. The old Dominican convent where the Jacobins have met since 1789. 5 years of revolutionary history within these walls. 5 years of power built speech by speech. The main hall holds 300 members. Benches in rows like a theater. Public gallery overhead. Oil lamps flicker in evening darkness. This is Robespierre's cathedral, where he preached revolutionary virtue, where disciples cheered his every word. Tonight feels different. Anxious whispers instead of confident proclamations. Robespierre enters to scattered applause. Not the thunderous ovation of previous months. Members study his face for weakness. Political survival in revolution requires reading invisible signs, a hesitation, a tremor, any crack in the facade of invincibility. 7:15. Club president calls the session to order. Routine reports from affiliated provincial clubs, letters from Marseille, Bordeaux, Toulouse, all expressing loyalty to the Jacobin cause. To Robespierre personally, but provincial loyalty means nothing if Paris abandons him. Jacques-Nicolas Billaud de Varennes sits in the front row. Committee of Public Safety member, former ally, now turned enemy. He was in the convention this afternoon when Robespierre's speech failed. He knows which way political winds blow. Billaud Varennes says nothing, but his presence speaks volumes. Jean-Marie Collot d'Herbois attend despite his duties as convention president. Another Committee of Public Safety member growing distant from Robespierre. Collot served as representative on mission in Lyon. His brutal suppression of rebels earned Robespierre's approval then. Now their relationship cools as the terror winds down. 8 o'clock, Robespierre rises to speak, the same 43 pages, the same accusations, the same unnamed conspirators, but the Jacobin audience responds differently than convention deputies. These men built their careers following Robespierre. They cheer his attacks on enemies. They demand blood from traitors. Midway through the speech, Billaud Varennes interrupts. His voice cuts through Robespierre's rhetoric. He defends the Committee of Public Safety against accusations of conspiracy. The two men face each other across the crowded hall. Former allies, now open enemies. The Jacobin unity that terrified France begins cracking. Collot d'Herbois joins the attack. He supports Billaud Varennes against Robespierre's charges. Two Committee of Public Safety members publicly breaking with their colleague. The audience divides. Some cheer Robespierre, others support his critics. The revolutionary faith that once seemed unshakable splinters before their eyes. 9:30. The confrontation intensifies. Robespierre accuses Billaud Varennes and Collot of betraying revolutionary principles. They respond by questioning his judgment, his isolation, his dangerous paranoia. Personal insults replace political arguments. The facade of revolutionary brotherhood collapses entirely. Other members try to restore order. The club president calls for calm. Speakers limit themselves to facts, not personalities, but passion overwhelms procedure. 5 years of accumulated tensions explode in public view. The men who created the terror turn on each other like wolves. 10:15. Below Varenne storms out. Collot follows him. A dozen other members leave with them. Not quite a mass exodus, but enough to signal Robespierre's weakening grip. The Jacobin club that once expelled enemies now expels Robespierre's former allies. Revolution consumes its own children. The remaining members rally around Robespierre. They pass a resolution supporting his convention speech. They condemn his enemies by name. They promise to defend revolutionary virtue against all conspirators. But empty gestures cannot restore lost power. Words without force become mere noise. 11 o'clock. The Jacobin session ends. Robespierre walks home through dark streets. Street lamps flicker in summer breeze. Night workers clear the day's refuse. Paris sleeps uneasily as political crisis deepens. By tomorrow evening, 1794's most powerful man will be dead. Back at the Duplay house, Robespierre finds visitors waiting. François Henriot, commander of the Paris National Guard, loyal to Robespierre since the purge of the Girondins 15 months ago. Henriot promises his 6,000 men will protect the Incorruptible against any attack, military force to back political power. But promises mean nothing without capability. Henriot's guards are political appointees, not professional soldiers. They follow him from habit, not conviction. When crisis comes, these men will calculate survival odds like everyone else. Loyalty has limits in revolutionary France. Midnight approaches. 26 July becomes 27 July. Robespierre's final day begins in darkness. He sits at his writing desk, surrounded by the accumulated papers of 5 revolutionary years. Speeches, letters, committee reports, the documentation of a life spent reshaping France through words and will. What does he think in these quiet hours? Does he understand his danger? Can he see the conspiracy forming around him? Or does the Incorruptible still believe virtue will triumph over treachery? That revolutionary faith will overcome political calculation? That tomorrow's convention session will restore his authority? The sources don't reveal his private thoughts. We know his actions, his public words, his political choices, but the inner man remains hidden behind the revolutionary mask. Maximilien Robespierre built his career as the people's voice. Tomorrow he discovers that the people's voice has changed its tune. 12:30. The house sleeps. Maurice Duplay locks the doors. Eleanor banks the kitchen fire. Robespierre's room glows with candlelight as he works. Always working, writing, reading, planning. The habit of power persists, even as power itself slips away. 1 o'clock, still writing. What words can save him now? What arguments will restore his authority? Robespierre believes in the power of ideas, in the force of righteousness, in the ultimate triumph of virtue over corruption. 5 years of revolutionary success support his faith. One day will destroy it. 1:30. The candle burns low. Robespierre finally sleeps. 4 hours until dawn. 4 hours before the convention session that will determine his fate. 4 hours before Saint-Just attempts to save them both with another speech. 4 hours before the Thermidorian conspiracy strikes. He sleeps badly. Fragments of dreams. Enemies closing in. Friends turning away. The guillotine that served him so well sharpening its blade for him. Maximilien Robespierre, the Incorruptible, enters his final day carrying the weight of 17,000 executions. Justice served. Terror unleashed. Revolution defended. By nightfall, he'll join his victims. 2 o'clock passes. 3 o'clock, the darkest hour before dawn. Paris breathes uneasily. In scattered rooms across the city, men make final preparations. Joseph Fouché counts votes. Jean-Lambert Tallien sharpens his dagger. Paul Barras coordinates timing. The conspiracy that will topple Robespierre gathers strength in darkness. Meanwhile, the Incorruptible sleeps fitfully in his narrow bed. Tomorrow, he'll discover that virtue without power becomes merely words, that terror without support becomes merely fear, that revolutions devour their children with methodical precision. The man who reshaped France through force of will has 22 hours left to live. 4:30. Dawn creeps through shuttered windows. Paris wakes to another summer day. The markets open early to avoid afternoon heat. Working men gather in groups, discussing politics in low voices. Everyone senses something approaching, a shift in the revolutionary weather, change in the wind that has blown for 5 bloody years. Robespierre stirs. The routine begins again. Cold water, clean shirt, careful attention to appearance. But today feels different, heavier, as if the air itself carries warning. He dresses slowly, listening to sounds from the street, normal morning noise. Nothing obviously threatening, yet danger lurks in normality during revolutionary times. 5:15, breakfast, bread and coffee. Eleanor Duplay serves him silently. She knows yesterday's failures at convention and Jacobin club, knows her idol's power is cracking, but she says nothing. What comfort can words provide when politics turns deadly? Loyalty becomes a luxury few can afford. 6 o'clock, a messenger arrives. The convention will meet at noon instead of the usual 10 o'clock start. 2 extra hours to prepare, or to plot. Robespierre doesn't know that his enemies spent the night in meetings, counting votes, assigning roles, coordinating the attack that will begin in 6 hours. Saint-Just appears at 6:30, pale and determined. His speech is ready. 2 hours defending Robespierre against all charges, attacking the conspiracy before it can strike. But Saint-Just makes the same mistake as his mentor. He believes words can overcome political mathematics. That virtue trumps votes. They review strategy. Saint-Just will speak first, defending Robespierre before accusations begin. Then Robespierre himself will respond to any attacks. 2 speeches, 2 hours, 2 final attempts to save the revolution they created. Neither man understands that salvation is already impossible. 7:30. Saint-Just leaves for his own lodgings to make final preparations. Robespierre remains at the Duplay house, pacing his narrow room. The walls that once protected him now feel like prison bars. Outside, enemies gather strength. Inside, isolation deepens. Power without allies becomes mere pretense. 8 o'clock. More messengers. Reports from the Jacobin Club. Letters from provincial affiliates, all expressing support. But provincial voices carry no weight in Paris street politics. When the crisis breaks, only local strength matters. Only immediate allies count. Robespierre's support base has shrunk to a few dozen men. François Henriot visits at 8:45. His National Guard units are ready, 6,000 men under arms, ready to defend the revolutionary government against all enemies. But Henriot's confidence masks growing uncertainty. His men follow orders from habit, not enthusiasm. Habit breaks under pressure. 9:30. Robespierre begins his final journey to the Tuileries. The same route he's walked for 5 years, past shops and taverns where his name once commanded respect, through streets where his word meant life or death. Today feels different. Fewer nods of recognition, more averted eyes. Power fades faster than fame. The National Convention convenes at noon. 600 deputies file into the old theater, the same curved benches, the same tribune where so many careers have been made and destroyed, the same public galleries where crowds once cheered Robespierre's every word. Today they wait in silence. 10:15. Early arrivals gather in small groups, whispered conversations, meaningful glances. The conspiracy that's been forming for weeks finally surfaces. Not openly, not obviously, but experienced politicians read the signs. Something will happen today. Something that will change everything. Joseph Fouché arrives early, taking his usual seat in the middle section. He nods to allies scattered throughout the hall, men who've been meeting secretly, planning carefully, waiting for the right moment. Today is their moment. Their choice is simple: act now or die tomorrow. Jean Lambert. Tallien enters with his hand inside his coat, touching the dagger he's carried for days. If words fail, steel will succeed. Revolutionary justice has many forms. The guillotine in the Place de la Révolution. The blade in the convention hall. Both serve the same purpose: removing enemies. 11 o'clock. More deputies arrive. The hall fills slowly. No one wants to seem eager. No one wants to appear too calm. Revolutionary politics demands careful performance. Every gesture matters. Every glance carries meaning. Survival depends on reading invisible signals. Collot d'Herbois takes his position as convention president. Last night, he broke publicly with Robespierre at the Jacobin Club. Today, he'll preside over Robespierre's destruction. The irony is deliberate. Revolutionary justice served by former allies turned enemies. Children devouring their fathers. 11:30. Robespierre enters the hall. 600 pairs of eyes follow his movement. He climbs to his usual seat in the topmost row. The mountain faction that once rallied around him now shifts uncomfortably. Yesterday's speech failed. Last night's Jacobin meeting ended in splits. Power is bleeding away. Saint-Just sits nearby, shuffling his speech papers nervously. 2 hours of defense planned. 2 hours of attack against unnamed conspirators. But he doesn't know that his enemies have turned defense into offense, that they've transformed his weapon into their trap. Words become evidence. Accusations become confessions. Noon strikes. Convention President Collot d'Herbois calls the session to order. The hall settles into expectant silence. Everyone knows this day will be different. Historic time. Final. The reign of terror that began with speeches will end with speeches, but not the speeches Robespierre expects. Saint-Just rises to begin his defense of Robespierre. His first words barely leave his mouth before Jean-Lambert Tallien interrupts. The trap springs immediately. Instead of allowing defense, the conspirators attack. They turn procedure against its masters. Use parliamentary rules to destroy parliamentary opponents. The great irony unfolds. The men who created the terror through careful political manipulation watch helplessly as their own methods destroy them. The techniques that eliminated Girondins, Hébertists, And Dantonists now claim they're inventors. Revolution does devour its children. With mathematical precision, Tallien's voice cuts through the hall like a blade. The speech you're about to hear hasn't been approved by the committees. Robespierre and Saint-Just have broken with proper procedure. They speak only for themselves. The attack begins immediately. No defense allowed. No explanation permitted. Parliamentary assassination by procedural knife. Billot Varenne rises next. Committee of Public Safety member turned prosecutor. He recounts last night's Jacobin Club confrontation. How Robespierre's paranoia drove away loyal allies. How isolation breeds dangerous delusions. How the incorruptible has become incorruptible madness. Each word strikes like a hammer blow. Saint-Just tries to continue his prepared defense. 2 hours of careful argument reduced to scattered fragments. Every time he speaks, new interruptions drown his words. The tribunal that once executed others now judges its creators. The same techniques, the same ruthless efficiency, the same inevitable conclusion. 12:30. The hall erupts in chaos. Voices shouting accusations, hands waving papers, deputies jumping from their seats. Robespierre attempts to reach the tribune. The crowd blocks his path. Former allies turn away. Former enemies close in. The isolation that protected him becomes the trap that destroys him. Bertrand Barrère delivers the killing blow. Committee of Public Safety member, master survivor. His voice carries absolute authority. These men have violated committee discipline, broken revolutionary unity, threatened governmental stability. The charges sound familiar. Every purge victim heard similar words before walking to the scaffold. 1 o'clock, the motion for arrest. 5 names called out: Robespierre, Saint-Just, Georges Couthon, Philippe Lebas, Augustin Robespierre. The inner circle that ruled France through terror now faces terror themselves. The vote is swift, overwhelming, final. The Thermidorian conspiracy succeeds in 30 minutes. François Henriot receives word at National Guard headquarters. The convention has arrested his protector. Time for military intervention. 6,000 men under arms. Cannons positioned around the Tuileries. Force of arms against force of words. But Henriot hesitates. His men smell political change. Orders become suggestions when power shifts. 1:30. The arrested deputies are led away. Not to immediate execution. Revolutionary law requires 24 hours between arrest and death. Time for evidence gathering. Trial preparation. Final procedures. The same legal forms they imposed on thousands of others now protect them briefly. Justice grinds slowly when it turns upon its servants. They're taken first to the Committee of General Security. Interrogation. Evidence collection. Formal charges. The bureaucracy of death that Robespierre perfected now processes him with clinical efficiency. Every form completed. Every procedure followed. Revolutionary justice demands proper paperwork even for its creators. 215, prison assignments. Luxembourg prison for Robespierre. La Force for Saint-Just. Different jails to prevent coordination. Standard security procedure. But something unexpected happens. The prison wardens refuse their charges. Too dangerous, too controversial. Let someone else handle the Incorruptible's imprisonment. Meanwhile, the Paris Commune meets in emergency session. The city government that supported Robespierre's rise now faces his fall. Claude Péan, mayor and close ally, calls for insurrection, armed resistance against the convention's illegal coup. The same tactics that brought Jacobins to power 3 years ago, 3 o'clock. The arrested deputies arrive at their assigned prisons. Doors remain closed, orders countermanded. Revolutionary bureaucrats suddenly develop scruples about housing political prisoners. Fear trumps duty when the political tide turns. Everyone calculates survival odds. A delegation from the Commune arrives with rescue orders. The prison officials, happy to avoid responsibility, release their charges immediately. No resistance, no questions. Revolutionary authority dissolves when competing powers clash. The arrested deputies taste freedom for 6 more hours. 3:45. The freed prisoners gather at the Hôtel de Ville. Paris City Hall becomes revolutionary headquarters. The same building where Robespierre orchestrated the overthrow of the monarchy in 1792, where he planned the purge of the Girondins in 1793. Now his final refuge. But the building feels different, emptier. The confident crowds of previous crises have thinned to a few hundred supporters. The sans-culottes who once cheered Robespierre's name now wait to see which way the wind blows. Revolution teaches harsh lessons about picking winning sides. 4:30. Word reaches the convention. The arrested deputies have been freed by commune conspiracy. Open rebellion against legitimate authority. The legal fiction of orderly transition collapses. Revolutionary France faces civil war between competing governments, the same choice that destroyed the monarchy. The convention acts swiftly. The arrested deputies are declared outlaws, enemies of the people. Outside legal protection, they can be killed immediately without trial. The same decree that condemned thousands during the Terror now targets its architects. Poetic justice with a procedural twist. 5 o'clock. Convention forces begin mobilizing. Paul Barras takes command of troops loyal to the new government. Not many men, but enough. Professional soldiers from the regular army, National Guard units that stayed neutral, citizens who smell change and want to survive it. Meanwhile, at the Hôtel de Ville, Robespierre's situation deteriorates rapidly. François Henriot arrives with confused reports. Some National Guard units support the Commune. Others back the convention. Most wait to see who wins before choosing sides. Revolutionary loyalty follows revolutionary success. 6 o'clock. The first skirmishes begin. Not battles, merely arguments with weapons. Small groups of men shouting at each other across Paris streets. Revolutionary France has mastered the art of political theater. Even civil war becomes performance art when everyone knows their roles. But the performance masks real danger. Both sides are armed. Both claim revolutionary authority. Both have killed for lesser causes. The Terror may end tonight with one final massacre. Either way, blood will flow in Paris streets before dawn breaks. 7:15. Inside the Hôtel de Ville, Robespierre faces reality. His support is melting like snow in July heat. Henriot's men desert hourly. The Commune members who promised resistance now debate surrender terms. The revolutionary base that seems solid proves to be built on shifting sand. Saint-Just remains calm. Always calm. The angel of death accepts death with philosophical resignation. At 26, he's lived through 5 years of revolution, seen friends become enemies, watched principles become excuses. Death holds no terror for someone who served it so faithfully. Georges Couthon sits in his wheelchair, paralyzed legs useless but mind still sharp. The man who drafted the law of 22nd Prairial now faces its consequences. No defense counsel, no witnesses, no appeal, just the blade and the basket. Revolutionary efficiency turned against its creator. 8 o'clock. The convention forces tighten their circle around the Hôtel de Ville. Paul Barras positions his men carefully. Artillery aimed at the main entrances, musket squads covering side streets. Not enough for a siege, but sufficient for intimidation, show of force before use of force. Inside, panic spreads through Robespierre's remaining supporters. City councilmen slip away through back doors, clerks burn compromising documents, guards abandon their posts. The revolutionary government that ruled Paris for 2 years dissolves in 2 hours. Power without popular support becomes powerless. 9:30. A white flag appears at a Hôtel de Ville window. Someone wants to negotiate. Surrender terms, safe passage, exile instead of execution. The same mercy Robespierre denied his enemies, the same compassion the Terror destroyed. Revolutionary justice allows no exceptions. Barras responds with cannon fire. One shot into the building's facade. Stone chips fly like deadly rain. The message is clear. No negotiation, no mercy. No quarter. The men who showed none will receive none. The Terror's final lesson in political education. 10:15. The Hôtel de Ville's defenders begin deserting en masse. Municipal guards throw down their weapons. Commune officials flee through cellar tunnels. National Guard units switch sides without ceremony. Revolutionary loyalty lasts exactly as long as revolutionary success. Robespierre watches his support evaporate. 50 men become 20, 20 become 10, 10 become 5. The inner circle that ruled France shrinks to a handful of faithful fools, men too compromised to run, too guilty to surrender, too proud to beg. 11 o'clock, the final preparations. Barras orders his men to storm the building at midnight. No prisoners except the main targets. Everyone else dies resisting legitimate authority. Revolutionary justice brooks no delays when the revolution itself is at stake. Inside, Robespierre makes his choice. Death by enemy bullet or death by friendly blade. The same choice he forced on thousands of others. Resist and die fighting. Surrender and die begging. Either way, the guillotine waits at dawn. Either way, the Terror claims its final victim. Midnight strikes. Convention forces advance on multiple fronts. Doors splinter under axe blows. Windows shatter from musket fire. The Hôtel de Ville becomes a battle zone as revolutionary France tears itself apart one final time. The sound of breaking glass mingles with shouted orders and dying screams. 12:30. The main hall falls to attacking troops. Bodies litter the marble floors where Robespierre once received revolutionary pilgrims. Blood stains the walls where portraits of revolutionary heroes hung until tonight. The temple of revolutionary virtue becomes a charnel house of revolutionary failure. 1 o'clock. The inner chamber where Robespierre makes his final stand. 5 men with pistols facing 30 soldiers with bayonets. Mathematics trumps courage. Numbers overcome virtue. The Incorruptible faces corruption by steel and lead. His final speech will be written in gunpowder and blood. The door bursts open. Soldiers flood the room like a gray tide. Saint-Just raises his weapon, fires once, misses everyone. A bayonet takes him in the chest. He falls backward, blood foaming from his mouth. The angel of death meets death with eyes wide open. Couthon tries to wheel away from the violence. His paralyzed legs make escape impossible. A musket butt crashes into his skull. The man who sent thousands to the guillotine dies with his brains leaking across stone floors. Revolutionary justice measures precisely 1:30. Robespierre's moment arrives. Pistol in his right hand. 30 enemies 10 feet away. Time for one shot, one final gesture of defiance, one last demonstration that virtue can triumph over force. The Incorruptible aims carefully at the nearest soldier, but something goes wrong. Maybe the pistol misfires, maybe his hand shakes, maybe divine justice intervenes. The bullet meant for his enemy strikes his own jaw instead. Bone explodes, teeth shatter, blood pours from his ruined mouth. The man who spoke France into revolution can speak no more. 2 o'clock. The Incorruptible lies on the floor, conscious but silent. His shattered jaw hangs at an impossible angle. Blood soaks his famous green coat. The careful appearance he maintained for 5 years destroyed in 1 second. Vanity meets reality through revolutionary surgery. The soldiers bind his wounds hastily. Revolutionary law requires living prisoners for morning execution. Dead men can't provide proper spectacle for vengeful crowds. The terror must end with appropriate ceremony. Robespierre will die publicly at the appointed time in the appointed place. 2:30. The prisoners are loaded onto carts for transport to the conciergerie, the same prison that held Marie Antoinette before her execution, the same cells that processed thousands of terror victims. Revolutionary justice operates from familiar locations with familiar procedures. Through dark Paris streets, the carts roll slowly toward the Seine. Crowds gather despite the early hour. Word spreads quickly when great men fall. Citizens want to witness history, to say they were present when the terror died, to confirm that even the Incorruptible can bleed. 3:15. The conciergerie receives its most famous prisoners. Robespierre, barely conscious from blood loss and shock. Saint-Just, pale but alert despite his chest wound. Couthon, mumbling incoherently through his cracked skull. The triumvirate that ruled France reduced to broken meat. Prison officials perform their duties mechanically. Strip the prisoners, examine their wounds, record their condition. Revolutionary bureaucracy continues even when revolution ends. Proper paperwork remains essential regardless of political circumstances. Forms must be completed before heads roll. 4 o'clock. Dawn approaches over revolutionary Paris. The city that witnessed 5 years of unprecedented change prepares for one final transformation. The terror that began with words and ended with blood will conclude with steel and ceremony. The guillotine waits patiently for its most illustrious clients. In the conciergerie's dampest cell, Robespierre drifts between consciousness and oblivion. Pain from his shattered jaw mingles with the agony of absolute defeat. The revolution he shaped through force of will has rejected him with brutal finality. Virtue has been weighed and found wanting. 4:30. The first spectators begin gathering in the Place de la Révolution, the same square where Louis XVI lost his head 18 months ago, where thousands of others followed him to revolutionary justice, where the guillotine earned its reputation as the great equalizer. Today it claims its greatest prize. The scaffold stands ready, fresh straw scattered on the platform, sharp blade gleaming in morning light. Executioner Charles-Henri Sanson testing the mechanism one final time. Everything prepared for the spectacle that will end the terror and begin the Thermidorian reaction. 5 o'clock. Full daylight reveals the magnitude of the previous night's events. The Hôtel de Ville stands empty and scarred, bodies removed but bloodstains permanent. The headquarters of Robespierre's power reduced to a monument of his failure. Revolution consumes its own children with architectural precision. At the conciergerie, prison doctors examine the condemned men. Robespierre's jaw wound is severe but not fatal. He'll live long enough for execution. Saint-Just's chest injury causes breathing problems but won't prevent his final journey. Couthon's head trauma produces confusion but leaves him conscious enough to understand his fate. 6:30. The Revolutionary Tribunal convenes for the shortest trial in its history. No witnesses called, no evidence presented, no defense permitted. The outlawry decree makes judicial proceedings mere formality. Death sentences pronounced before defendants appear. Revolutionary efficiency at its purest. 7 o'clock. Back in the Place de la Révolution, crowds swell beyond previous records. 30,000 people pack the square and surrounding streets. Every class represented, every age present. The execution of Robespierre draws bigger audiences than the king's death. Celebrity trumps royalty in revolutionary France. Vendors sell bread and wine. Pickpockets work the dense crowds. Children climb lampposts for better views. Execution day becomes festival day when the victim is sufficiently notorious. The people who once cheered Robespierre's speeches now gather to witness his silence. 8:15. The death carts leave the conciergerie for their final journey. 3 vehicles carrying 22 condemned men. Robespierre in the first cart, barely conscious, jaw wrapped in bloody bandages, the Incorruptible reduced to a broken figure slouched against wooden rails. The procession moves slowly through Paris streets, guards on horseback, drummers beating funeral rhythms, crowds pressing close to see the fallen tyrant. The same route thousands of victims traveled before them, the same ceremony, the same destination. Revolutionary tradition demands consistency. 9 o'clock, the Place de la Révolution explodes in savage celebration as the carts arrive. 30,000 voices roar approval, fists wave in the air, hats fly skyward. The people's justice approaches its climax. The terror that claimed so many lives ends with one final spectacular death. Robespierre is dragged from his cart by rough hands. His legs barely support his weight. Blood from his jaw wound has soaked through the bandages, staining his shirt red. The careful appearance he maintained throughout his career destroyed by violence and neglect. 9:30. Saint-Just walks steadily to the scaffold despite his chest wound. The angel of death maintains dignity even at the end. No final speech, no dramatic gestures, just cold acceptance of inevitable fate. He climbs the steps without assistance, showing the crowd how revolutionaries die. 10 o'clock. Couthin's wheelchair is carried to the platform. The paralyzed man who drafted the harshest laws of the terror faces their ultimate application. His head injury causes visible confusion, but he understands where he is. What's happening? Why it must happen. Revolutionary logic completes its circle. The crowd's bloodthirsty roar reaches crescendo as Robespierre approaches the guillotine. Charles-Henri Sanson, the executioner, strips away the bloody bandages holding the broken jaw in place. Robespierre screams in agony as torn flesh rips open. His final sound echoes across the silent square. 10:15. The blade falls. Maximilien. Robespierre, the Incorruptible, architect of the terror, voice of revolutionary virtue, joins his victims in revolutionary death. The crowd erupts in celebration. The terror is finished. The Thermidorian reaction begins. France stumbles toward whatever comes next. But the story doesn't end with Robespierre's death. Within hours, 70 members of the Paris Commune follow him to the guillotine. The largest mass execution in revolutionary history. Blood begets blood until exhaustion stops the killing. Revolution devours its children until no children remain. The real revelation emerges years later when historians examine the Thermidorian conspiracy's planning documents, found in Joseph Fouché's archived papers at the Bibliothèque Nationale. The plot against Robespierre began in May 1794. 7 weeks before his speech triggered the crisis. His enemies weren't reacting to his threats. They were implementing a carefully orchestrated plan. The Thermidorians had counted votes months in advance, identified wavering deputies, prepared coordinating signals, assigned specific roles to key conspirators. The chaos in the convention on 9 Thermidor was theater. The real decisions were made in secret meetings during quiet spring nights. Even more chilling, Fouché's private notes reveal the conspirators never intended to end the terror, only to redirect it. They feared Robespierre's growing isolation would destroy revolutionary government entirely. Their coup aimed to preserve terror by changing its leadership. Revolution devouring its children to save itself. The final irony emerges from the conciergerie's execution records. Discovered during 19th century renovations and now held at the archives de la Préfecture de Police. Robespierre's name appears on a list of condemned prisoners prepared 3 days before his arrest. Someone had already decided his fate while he polished his fatal speech. Revolutionary justice had marked the Incorruptible for death before he knew he was in danger. The man who sent 17,000 people to the guillotine was himself guillotined by a system that operated with mechanical precision. Terror, consuming terror in an endless cycle of revolutionary appetite.